Thinking aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Our topic today is working with comas. And my guest, Dr. Arnold Mindell, is the author of COMA, Key to Awakening. Dr. Mindell is the leader of the Center for Process-Oriented Psychology in Portland, Oregon, and in Zurich, Switzerland. He's also the author of 7 other books, including Dream Body, The Process Psychology of the Dream Body, River's Way, and City Shadows. Welcome, Arnie.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeffrey.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
It is a pleasure.
Yeah. You know, the work you do with comas is so exciting to me because it challenges one of our most fundamental notions about people in comas, that they're unreachable, that they're in a vegetative, like dead state, and you find so much life in them.
Well, I wouldn't say I find life in them. People are lively in them. The assumption that people are, because they're in altered states of consciousness or in sleepy states or comatose states, the idea that there's nobody home is a prejudice. That's due to the fact that if you're not talking to somebody, you're not in order. So nobody has spent enough time trying to go into comatose states to understand and try to communicate with people there.
How did this work begin for you?
How did it begin? Well, when I began my practice in Zurich, Switzerland, 1968, I was always fascinated by people who were dying and people who were very sick, as well as normal people. And so I just began to visit them in the hospital and work with them, and working with anybody in a coma or anybody who's really sick over long periods of time frequently ends up working with them when they're also in comatose states or in sleepy states of unconsciousness.
In your work, the theories that you developed, process-oriented psychology, involves accepting what is as part of the human process and working with it, helping to amplify it, accelerate it, so that whatever a person presents to you, you seem ready to work with.
Well, that's right. Process-oriented psychology is meant to work with people in all states of consciousness and under any circumstances. That's its hope, or that's its attempt, that's its goal. Whether people are psychotic or in normal states, in comatose states, or groups of people, or people in relationships, the hope is that we'll develop a psychology that's unified enough to work with people regardless of what condition that they're in.
And my sense is that if I were to summarize this work, it has to do with the now moment, looking at what's happening and following its own course, amplifying it, and so that you can really get a handle on what really is going on.
That's right. The idea behind process work and behind this form of psychotherapy is that what is happening to an individual has all the keys to the solution of that person's problems. Right here in front of us, what is going on is the key to their difficulties.
So in that sense, I suppose a person in a comatose state is not necessarily any more unreachable or difficult to work with than a person in normal consciousness.
That's right. If you consider the whole person that you're working with, then you don't work with a person just who's able to talk. You work with a person who is also, his eyes are closed or her eyes are closed, and they're breathing deeply, and maybe coughing or even choking, and that all of those things are signals, they're attempts to communicate certain states of consciousness. That's the basic assumption.
So you must need to train yourself and the people who work with you in the art of observing these subtle little signals that most of us would tend to overlook.
That's right. I can give you an example of those signals. Think of a man that I mentioned in this book that you already talked about, COMA. While I was working with my mother in Miami some years ago as she was dying, there was this very difficult character in the next room who was groaning and making tremendous noises. Did you read that about
Oh,
this guy?
yes,
Man I
yes.
called Sam.
Yeah.
And he was dying of cancer. He must have been in his 80s. And he was, his eyes were closed, and he would groan loudly every now and then. And since
It was disturbing the hospital
disturbing the
staff.
hospital, and since he had been there for, it must have been 6 months on and off, and hadn't talked to anybody, the nurses and doctors knew that I was there. They said, well, why don't you come next door and see what you can do with Sam? He's a noisy character, and we don't know what to do with him.
Is this usual that somebody in a coma will be making noises?
No, well, people, it depends. They make noises. Sometimes there's pneumonia and they're drowning, but this was a person who would groan every now and then and make gurgling noises like that, and sometimes go, ooh, or his eyes wouldn't open like mine.
Important signals.
Important signals. So I went to see him in the next room.
But to most people,
Yeah.
if I can interrupt you.
Yes, do that,
Most people would think, the hospital staff, these aren't signals, this is an annoyance, probably.
That's right. That's right. Well, the medical idea about the human being is that what's happening to you, if it's not normal, it's pathological. It's something wrong and something that should be healed. But the process idea is that what's happening to you is a signal trying to communicate you from your unconscious or from unconsciousness. It's your whole self trying to come out.
So in that sense, any phenomenon, any symptom isn't necessarily a pathology, it's part of a healing process.
That's right. We assume that what's happening to somebody, it's good to think of them as if they're sick and it needs to be healed, but it's not half as enriching and as inspiring as trying to find out the meaning of what it is. And to do that, you have to follow the very, very subtle signals of someone.
So as I recall, they called you in to look at this fellow Sam simply because they thought he was disturbing the whole ward with his noise.
Right, and because he was supposed to die already. He was like, had been around for a long time, and he would neither get better nor he was in a hospice situation. So should I tell you more about that?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So there he is lying there, and his eyes are like half closed like this, and he makes noises every now and then, like that, and ooh, woo, and so that's a signal for me. And through my studies of signals and people's communication modes, I got closer to him, and I did the same thing he did. I amplified his signal. You just said that a minute before.
Yes.
And he went, ooh, and I went also with him, ooh, and he kept making the same gurgling noise. And I went with him. And then finally he went, ooh, and I went louder than him. And I said, ooh. And suddenly I knew that we had communicated because he no longer repeated the same signal but added something to it. He not only went, ooh, he went, ooh, woo. And I was shocked. Every time I work with somebody, even though I know they're real people down there, I was shocked that he was communicating. So I went with him and I said, woo, woo. And one of his eyes opened, and his eyes were like right up to the top of his head, like I'm doing right now with my eyes. His eyes were right up straight. I can't put them up as high as his were. And he went, woo, woo. And I said, go ahead and look, because when the eyes roll up like that, frequently people are visualizing something. And I said, what do you see up there? And he went, woo, woo, wah, wow. He went, wow, and I went, wow. And he said, wow, and I said, yeah, that's really amazing. I didn't know what he was seeing. And he said, oh, wow, wow. And I said, Sam, go and take a look at that. He said, wow, there's a shh, and it took a long time, and I won't take our time right now to go through the details of that, but suddenly, after about 5 minutes of doing that, he said, there's a ship. And I said, a ship? What kind of ship? And Sam said, there's a white ship, and it's coming for Sam.